Hello, hello. Welcome, folks. This is session 3 of Puzzle Jam Global. But welcome. We're excited to have you here. It's a great day of talks, Q&A, puzzle giveaways from fantastic members of the puzzle community, a very diverse community of panelists here today. I am your host, Joyce Yu, very enthusiastic about puzzles, and I also have a puzzle company of my own. Not quite puzzles, but puzzle adjacent. So my company is Puzzworthy, and I'm here today to kind of facilitate some of our speakers and our giveaways and whatnot. All right, let's get into our next talk, which is called Picture Perfect Puzzling. And our speakers are Nick and Shelly. They are a husband and wife team. They specialize in wood grain and marquetry puzzles. Marquetry is kind of a new term to me, so hopefully Nick and Shelly can explain what that means when they come up here. So let me just kind of bring you on to the side here. So they live in central Louisiana with their 3 cats and 3 dogs. It's quite a menagerie. They love all methods of making, whether it's gardening, woodworking, ceramics, costume making. Very creative couple. Nick spent about 2 decades working in Hollywood productions, filming weddings, shooting product photos, and loves sharing his knowledge with anyone who will listen. And Shelly had no interest in photography until she met Nick, but she brings Nick back to reality when he starts nerding out a little bit too hard about cameras. So, Nick and Shelly, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. Would love for you to kind of introduce yourself, say hello, and then we'll let you take it away with your talk.
Hi, everyone. So just to get ahead of the curve, it'd be almost impossible to get all 6 of our animals on camera. So I know that we asked that on the last one. That may not be possible this time around. So yeah, we're Nick and Shelly. We make wood marquetry puzzles. To answer Joyce's question, wood marquetry is where you take thin wood veneers and you cut them into pictures and patterns. And we'll actually have a little bit of example of that within this presentation. But you are always free to check out our social medias and our website, and you'll see even more examples. All right, so welcome. Today we're going to be talking about photography. And the great thing about product photography or photography in general is it doesn't really matter what we're taking pictures of. So even though we are here and we're talking about puzzles, and we're in an amazing puzzle global, I think one of the first ones, conventions. This is going to help you with anything you want to take pictures of, right? This is going to help when you want to take pictures of your kids or of your puzzles, or if you're trying to take professional puzzle photos, or you just want to take pictures for your Instagram. So let's talk a little bit about us. Joyce kind of covered a lot of this. We love to make stuff. Puzzles is one of the things that we like to make. We recently, well, I guess it's been 2 years now that we've been making puzzles.
Yeah.
2 years. We started
Two
by
and a half.
making 2.5. We started by making wood tray puzzles that were grid cut. And then as we started getting more into the puzzle community, we saw all the amazing things that could be done with whimsies and different cut styles. And our first puzzle event was actually Puzzle Jam South.
Until that event, we didn't know whimsies existed. We didn't know anything besides grid cut puzzles existed. And we've learned so much, and that event was amazing. So we're happy to be here at this one.
And so as we grew as puzzle makers, we started exploring with different ways of cutting. We started exploring with different ways of packaging our stuff. And it gave us opportunities to grow as makers and learn cool new ways to make stuff. So a little bit about me. Apparently, I've always had a camera in my hand. My mom recently sent me this picture over, and it made me laugh. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, California. For those that know that area, I'm from Burbank specifically. Moved to Tampa. Well, actually, we'll get into that in a second. So in there, I worked in film and television. My very first job out of high school is actually working on a little show you might know called Grey's Anatomy. I left there, started a small production company. We did corporate work, we did commercials, we did music videos. I actually shot my own feature film. Loved having a camera in my hand. I also would do headshots for actors. So we made friends with, or I made friends with a bunch of actors, um, and basically fell in love with being able to capture who people were. And I actually would pay actors with headshots and editing their reels for them to work in my short films. So it was a nice little trade there. Um, when I moved to Tampa, which is actually where Shelly and I met, the film industry doesn't exist the same way there as it does in Los Angeles. So I actually got into marketing, and I actually ran the digital marketing team for a marketing firm there. We Through that, I actually was able to build the marketing campaigns for companies that you may or may not have heard of, and really learned how to utilize images and videos to engage with people in an online space. Um, Also, Shelly and I are massive underwater or massive scuba divers fans. I actually sold all of my film equipment at one point in time just to buy one camera and a dive housing so I could take pictures while we were scuba diving. I've since refilled my camera collection.
He's replaced some of that equipment at this point.
And one of those things was actually getting back into film photography. So when the pandemic started, I actually got really deep into film photography, and I think I have probably about 15 film cameras.
At least.
In addition to various digital cameras that I have, I actually have 2 film cameras for scuba diving with. And that's a process that I love sharing with people. I love teaching people how to shoot on film and how to develop their own film. So all that to say, I really like talking about photography. Maybe a little too much. So I am hoping to not get super technical in this presentation. We're going to keep it relatively high level. We're going to focus on concepts that you may or may not be aware of, and then how to utilize those concepts in any picture you're taking. Let's dive into it. What is the best camera? There are tons of different camera types. You guys have probably heard of DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, you've got action cameras, you've got your phone, film cameras, right? What camera is the best? We have a couple of examples here of photos that we have taken with various cameras. So this one was taken with my iPhone 15 Pro Max, which has a 48 megapixel image. You may or may not have heard of that. What megapixels is? Megapixels are basically how big the image is, right? And most people would think more megapixels, more better, right? But here's a picture taken with a full frame camera. This is the Sony a7R III. It actually has less megapixels at 42.2. And then here's one that's actually almost a dedicated video camera, which is also a full frame camera. We'll explain what full frame means in a moment. That is significantly less. It's 12.1 megapixels. And at this distance, they all kind of look the same. There's actually studies that have been done where they have taken pictures with smartphones with giant cameras that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and they'll print them out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and give them to professional photographers and ask them to pick which one was taken with which. Generally, people can't distinguish between the two. So the megapixel count generally isn't a great indicator of whether or not you're going to be able to take a good photo. What we've done is for each of those, we've zoomed in on the same portion of the puzzle. And what we're seeing is with the iPhone image, with our mobile image, even though it has more megapixels, we actually don't have more detail, right? It's not as clean, it's not as sharp as it is with our similarly megapixeled full frame camera. And the reason for that is the sensor on the full frame is so much larger than what's on an iPhone or on any phone. This is sensor size. So a sensor on a camera is what's behind the glass, what's behind the lens. It's actually what is taking the picture. It used to be film, now it's a digital sensor. And this in the bottom left-hand corner, that blue square, that is roughly the size of what most mobile phones use as their sensor, right? And then you may have heard of Micro Four Thirds. You may have heard of ASP or crop sensor, which are the red and yellow ones. But most people, when they're thinking about a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, they're thinking about a full frame camera. And you can see just how much bigger that is. So even though they might have the same amount of pixels or similar megapixels within them, the size of those are able to capture so much more light. They're able to capture so much more detail. Big camera, better camera, right? Because that sensor is bigger, images are going to be better. We also get benefits of things like swappable lenses. You can take off one lens and put a different one on that'll give you a different look. Maybe you're a little bit wider, a little bit more telephoto. We'll talk about those coming up in a bit. You might be able to add on a macro lens, right? Higher end phones do have multiple lenses, but if you look at it, usually when you swap your lenses, you wind up with less megapixels. Granted, like we just talked about, megapixels doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be better, but one of the most important things is you actually get better control over the settings of the camera. Big camera doesn't necessarily mean better camera. Phones are still great. We actually have done probably about 50% of the photos across our two Instagrams with our phones. They are phenomenal. Having a phone camera is better than not having a camera at all. They still take good photos, and they're a lot quicker and a lot more portable than a big camera to go from taking a picture to posting it. And they require usually a little bit less editing. But what you get with that is you get something that's a little less detailed, that's a little less customized for what you guys might want to be accomplishing. What camera is best? The best camera is the camera you have with you. But a bigger camera will be better in most situations. But it's, again, better to have a camera when you want to take a picture than no camera. There is something called the exposure triangle, and this is what controls how your images look. Every image that you've ever taken uses the exposure triangle. Within your camera, there are three things that controls how the image looks. And you may have heard of these things like ISO, things like shutter speed, and aperture. Each of these has the ability to make the image brighter or darker. But they also all have a creative effect on the image. Now, a common analogy for explaining how these three things works is it's like a water hose, right? If you imagine if you go out to your garden and you turn on the faucet, how long you turn it on is your shutter speed, right? How the longer you turn it on, the more water or the more light you get. For your aperture, it's how big your hose is. Your garden hose is a small circle, but a fire hose is a lot bigger. It's going to be able to put through more water. And your ISO is like water pressure. So this is how much actual PSI or pressure is pushing through that pipe. If you have more pressure, you're going to get more water through. And so you're able to use all three of those things creatively to get a properly exposed image, but then also the right creative look that you want. This is an example of shutter speed. Shutter speed is great for capturing motion or movement or freezing it. So a slow shutter speed is going to blur things that are moving, and a faster shutter speed is going to freeze them as if they're standing still. Going back to our water hose example, this is like turning the hose on and off. The longer it's on, the more light we're capturing, but the more movement we're going to capture within our image. This is literally how long the sensor is being exposed to light, and it's usually measured in fractions of a second. So we can see here it's 1/1000th of a second versus 1/15th of a second. If you're hand holding it, having a slower shutter speed might introduce blur from camera shake. As you're even though you're trying to hold it steady, it might be moving on you. So aperture is going to control how much depth of field we have. So it's introducing blur similar to how shutter speed does, but instead of that blur being introduced by things physically moving within the frame, it's going to be introducing blur by what's in focus. So a great example of this is on the right-hand side, we can see that the tin, the teapot, and the tin in the background are all in focus because we have a very small aperture, very small hole. On the left-hand side, we can see we're shooting at a faster or a larger aperture, and so just the teapot is in focus. And what this helps to do is it helps create separation. It helps you highlight something very specific within your scene. Going back to the water hose example, this is very similar to the size of the hose. And the aperture works the same way. It's actually that F number is a mathematical representation of how big the opening is. So the higher number on the right is actually representing a smaller hole. And the larger number or the smaller number on the left-hand side is actually representing a bigger hole. And that's affecting how much is able to be in focus at a specific time. Most phones have a fixed aperture and you can't change it. Just like we're talking about right now, the exposure triangle, there's actually a depth of field triangle. So what we're seeing here on these two examples is depth of field. On the left-hand side, we're seeing a shallow depth of field, only a little bit wherever we're setting our focus is in focus, right? And a deep depth of field is what we're seeing on the right-hand side where more is in focus. So the last thing that affects our exposure, how bright our image is, but also having a creative effect is our ISO. Those of you that remember film photography, when we wanted to change our ISO, we had to physically take the film out of the back of the camera and put a new one in, right? With digital sensors these days, we're actually changing the sensitivity of that sensor to light. So going back to the water hose example, this is again that PSI, right? How much we are able to capture, how much water is actually physically going through our hose. The creative effect to it is that it adds grain to your image. The higher your ISO, the more grain you're going to see in the image. And the right-hand side, which is ISO 6400, which is generally considered a higher ISO, is very grainy compared to our ISO at 100. And obviously these are both zoomed in to show what that grain looks like. With film, is defined by the chemistry on the film strip, what the sensitivity was. But then with digital, it's kind of like turning up the volume on your sensor. We've talked about the exposure triangle, right? These are the three things that affect how bright your image is, and each also have a creative effect on the image. So going through them quickly again, shutter speed is going to control our motion blur, aperture is going to control our depth of field, and ISO is going to affect the grain that's on the image. Everyone's heard of auto on their bigger cameras, and they know that their phone makes all those decisions for you. Understanding these three things allows you to say, okay, auto is going to get me here. Now maybe I switch it into manual mode and, I want to get a little bit of motion blur, something's going by, or I want to separate my background, my subject from my background. So I'm going to open up the aperture a little bit. Understanding how these works allows you to make creative decisions on your photos as opposed to just finding what is technically correct. There's a secret fourth thing that affects how bright your image is. And it's light. So obviously light doesn't exist within your camera, but it's so important for how your image looks that it makes sense that we talk about it and we understand how light affects images.
And as someone who is not super technical with cameras, I'm still very much learning all of these things. That is something that's really easy to see how fast it changes the image. So if you're shooting on auto, this is something that you can do that can creatively affect the image.
Oh, absolutely.
And make it a lot better.
This is an example of what's considered hard light versus soft light. A great way of imagining this is if you're out at noon, right, on a cloudless day, you've got the sun shining down really harsh, really bright. And it's going to create hard shadows, hard to define shadows on the ground, right? And you can see that here on the left-hand side. If we look at the shadow that's being cast by this guy's nose, we can see the actual outline of its features on his cheek. Compare that to soft light on the right-hand side, which would be more akin to an overcast day, right? The sun's still in that direction, but it's being diffused through the clouds. And so we can't see as harsh of a line where the shadow starts and ends. It's a little bit more blurred. How do we get soft light, right? If we're not filming outside, we don't want to wait around for it to be a cloudy day, right? One of the easiest and absolute cheapest ways to do it is to film next to a window, right? Not where the window is coming in direct or where the light is coming directly through the window, but being near the window is going to have that light be bouncing all around the room. Or maybe you have gone out and you've bought lights. You can add a diffuser in front of that, maybe also known as a softbox. Um, could be that you're bouncing it. That's one of the things I do very frequently is I'll take a light and I'll just bounce it against the wall and against the ceiling. And it creates just this nice soft lighting over everything that I'm doing. How does this affect the look of the image, especially is what we're talking about in puzzles here, right? The easy clean definition, and it gets a lot more nuance than this, is hard light is going to show the detail of things, right? We can start to see the texture of, especially if we've got a wooden puzzles, right? Or if we've got a unique box or we've got something uniquely textured. If you put hard light on that, because it shows off all of that detail, we're going to be able to see that texture pretty well. Soft light is generally considered to be more flattering, right? When we're taking pictures, um, we we generally want softer light. Now, creatively, there might be reasons for us to use a hard light, so we don't want to just immediately throw out the use of hard light. One of the best examples that I know of soft light is most people have heard of golden hour, right? Oh, the best time to take pictures is golden hour. I have friends coming up to me all the time asking me, how do I take pictures at golden hour? What is golden hour? Golden hour is that time right after the sun is setting, or it's just setting in the sky. So you're still getting that warm light coming across, but most of the light is bouncing off of the atmosphere. And it's like you're standing inside this amazing softbox. This is something we do frequently. Getting just white foam core like you use in a school presentation, right? And bouncing light off of that, or even getting close to a window and putting that on one side will help to diffuse the
And the
light.
soft light also can help reduce glare. I think somebody mentioned earlier
Yes.
how to reduce glare on puzzles, because there a lot of the and one of the presenters earlier mentioned going to a mat because of glare. So a softer light can and bounced light can help with that.
Absolutely. If you have something that is particularly reflective, an example of this is a glossy puzzle, but I also did photography, product photography for a stainless steel elephant ornament. The whole thing was basically a mirror. And the best way that I found to take a picture of that was to basically take thin paper, large sheets of it, and make a dome over the product that I wanted to do. That way, every direction that light could bounce off of it was being diffused by this white paper, and I couldn't see like a stark line where the paper ended and maybe my room in the background began. One of the other great things for glare, since we're talking on this at the moment, is generally you're going to see glare when the direction that you are looking, not even with your camera, just with your eyes, is looking at your puzzle in this instance, and it has glare where it was kind of bouncing off. Usually there's a light source that's a little bit brighter there. So one of the ways that you can fix that is if you put something in the background that blocks that harsh light source. And then I'm going to do one more thing on this that is wildly off topic for lighting. I recognize there is a thing, if you are frequently finding that you're having issues with glare with your puzzle photography, look up a polarizing filter. It's basically a filter that sits on the front of your lens that you can spin, and it changes the direction from which light rays are allowed to enter, similar to polarizing sunglasses, where if you go outside and you're trying to look into water or something similar, having polarizing sunglasses will let you be able to do that. They make those as filters that can go onto your camera. It's actually something, even though our puzzles generally are more matte because they're natural wood, we still typically will use because it generally makes the puzzles look a little bit more even. So moving on to the second part of light that we're going to be talking about, you are likely all very familiar with this. And so this is the color temperature of the light. This is probably one of the biggest ones that only matters when you get it wrong. There's not a lot of creative decisions with this. Your phone, your camera is going to be able to auto white balance for you, usually pretty well. There's some unique situations that it might not be able to. So the biggest thing that I can suggest with this is not mixing your color temperatures. So the lights that we have are all able to be balanced one way or the other, but I wouldn't suggest doing that. I would just buy lights that's usually cheaper that are daylight balanced and just make sure that that's all that you're taking pictures with. That way you can use the sun, but if it's nighttime and you want to take pictures, you can also just use those lights, and you can also balance them with natural light coming in through your window. So high level, soft lighting is going to be more flattering. Hard lighting is going to show more detail, and just don't mix your color temperature. Let's talk about focal length. How does focal length affect your images? So focal length is generally what we think of for wide or telephoto. Wide is going to kind of distort the image a little bit more, and telephoto is going to be a little bit more flattering, less distorted, and gives us that separation of our subject and our background. Generally, most phones is normal. You pull it out and you can go to take a picture is going to be 24-ish millimeters, which is generally considered to be wide angle. So having something that can be a little bit more zoomed in is going to generally make something look a lot nicer. So with puzzles, if we want to kind of take a step back and zoom in, it's going to, especially if we've got flat lace things going around it, it's generally going to look a little bit better. What's the best focal length? Longer is typically better, but really you need to choose what's best for your composition. So what is composition? Sorry, I made myself giggle with that one. Okay, there are hundreds of ways to compose an image. The two ones that'll make the biggest improvement for you is utilizing the rule of thirds. So this is the rule of thirds, and it basically is dividing top to bottom, left to right, thirds. And generally, if you want something to look good, place whatever your subject is along one of those third lines, preferably at the cross point between two of the lines. So just like the person is right along that third line on the right, and their face, their head, is right on the upper right point where the two cross. This is going to make it look better. It adds balance. It is well composed. You also can see on this one, the horizon is running along the bottom third line. So the more that you can align whatever's in your image to those third lines, generally, the better it's going to look. And the other one that'll work well is if you center it up. This gives a very Wes Anderson vibe. He is very famous for, if you've seen any of his movies, things are centered up and play out very well in the center of a frame. And this image here of a dog running across a bridge is a great example of that. The camera is right in line at the same level as a subject in the center of the bridge as well. It really helps to sell that effect. So what composition is best? There is no best. There are hundreds of thousands of ways, but one of the quickest ways you can step up your photography is to try to utilize one of those two. All right, how to stand out. Here's the secret to this. You got to find your own style. One of the biggest things from my digital marketing background that I learned was if you have a consistency to not just your posting schedule, but the style and look of your images, it builds a visual identity for your brand, right? If you have a puzzle that's textured, if you take a hard light and you move it down to the edge of the puzzle and let that light just kind of skate across the surface, it's really going to highlight that texture, right? Most people, when they're taking a picture of a puzzle, they'll put it onto a background of some sort, maybe their kitchen table, their counter, they'll lay out some paper, and they'll take a picture straight down with it. How can you change your elevation or how you're framing the puzzle or highlight specific pieces of the puzzle? One of my favorite things for us to do is we pull out the whimsies and we set the whimsies up and get at level with the whimsies and take pictures of those. With that, I think we've got a number of Q&As here. The first one, what are some good software apps to edit photos? everyone has heard of Photoshop. We used Photoshop in all of the Adobe Suite until about a year ago.
Yeah, about a year.
Because we were tired of paying them like $120 a month for access to everything. One of the ones that we have decided works probably the best for us is Affinity. Affinity has a suite of 3 applications, one of which is called Affinity Photo. It is a one-time payment, and they run deals all the time. I think we picked up all 3 apps for $60. However, on your phone, if you're taking a picture with your phone app, especially iPhones, I haven't messed around with Android too much. The built-in editing controls in there are amazing. So if you're mostly doing mobile photography, that is probably going to be your best bet. Most of us on Instagram are using our phone cameras. Do you have any easy tips or suggestions for creating better light and brighter pictures? The 2 things that I'm reading there is better light and brighter pictures. So let's talk about the brighter picture ones, because that's probably going to be the easiest ones to fix. On your phone, as you're taking a picture of something, you can tap to set your exposure. If you've got really bright parts of your scene and really dark parts, tap on the brightest part of the image so that it exposes for that. Our cameras are really good at capturing detail in the shadows, things that are really dark. So when you are editing your photos or when you're taking your picture, expose for the brightest part of the image and let things get a little bit darker than it feels like they need to. And then when you open up the camera app, you can actually raise the shadows and the midpoints of your photo and bring that information back up. What Instagram and a lot of apps will do is they'll actually add a little bit more contrast to your image, which makes it feel darker. So if you naturally bring up the exposure a little bit, and then on top of that, bring the shadows up a little bit, it's going to make the image feel a little bit brighter.
And that's editing on the phone.
That's editing on the phone.
Within the app on the phone.
Absolutely. For better lighting, the easiest thing that I have told people to do for lighting is IKEA sells, I think it's a 1600 watt daylight light bulb. And then if you get the China ball kit, which is the string that comes down and just has a socket on one end and a wall outlet on the other, and the big soft ball that goes around it, I have filmed many talking head videos and product photos by taking 2 of those and just putting them on both sides of the image. If puzzles, if you are taking a top-down photo and you want a little bit better light, if you take your phone and a napkin and shine it through the napkin, it will act like a diffuser. How to take pictures when you're in an indoor environment that you aren't going to be able to get the best photos. And the biggest thing that I can say is find a window that has natural light coming through it and use that to help increase your exposure, and just it adds warmth and vibrancy to a photo. All right, what are common mistakes people make when taking photos? As you're taking the picture, look at what is in the frame.
If you have something cluttered on the table in the background.
If you've got a texture that's on your background, usually a lot of the ones I've seen, people are taking it on like wooden tables. Align the puzzle with the grain of the wood. It just visually looks better. All right, let's go on to the next one. Good equipment to get good puzzle shots. I think the first thing that you should do is get better lights. You keep using your phone, but get a better light, something that you can add diffusion onto, or is a little bit brighter than what a regular light bulb would be. How to get true colors with phone cam is the next one. Honestly, phones are pretty good with that these days. Usually if the color looks a little bit different from the photo you've taken to what you're seeing in real life, it's because it got the color balance a little bit off. So if you go to edit the photos, you can adjust the color balance and make it look a little bit better. Or one of the best ways of doing it is if you click on the thing that you want to look the best, generally your phone will take the best picture. Best white balance when taking pictures of puzzles indoors. Don't mix your color temperatures. Make sure everything, all the lights that are around you are of the same color temperature. That is the first thing that you need to do. And then just like the previous question, tap on the image if you're using a smartphone tap on the puzzle and it'll expose, focus, and white balance for what you've tapped on. Glitter, sparkle, foil effects are things that many of us have had difficulty photographing in puzzles. I think it's easier with video, but I haven't quite figured out how to capture the brilliance of those shimmers. So the reason that shimmers look good is because they shimmer. And at a freeze frame, you are not going to be able to see that shimmer because a shimmer by definition is something turning on, turning off almost, right? One of the best things that you can do for that is using a hard light to emphasize that and put it. So if your picture is here or your puzzle is here and you're taking a picture from this direction, put the light on this direction. Kind of the exact opposite of what we were talking about for trying to reduce glare. Exactly.
Thank you so much. That was super informative and interesting. I learned a ton. I hope it's going to make my puzzles better as well. So we will see you in the next session. Thanks, everybody.
Hi! If you've made it to this part of the video, it means that you have just finished watching a Puzzle Jam Global session. Puzzle Jam Global is brought to you by Puzzle Jam Inc. and our members, and we wanted to thank them as well as our presenters who made this event possible. Now that we're on your puzzle radar, you don't want to miss out on any of the other puzzle events that we have planned. So go to the link in our description and sign up for our newsletter. Our newsletter is about once a month, and you'll be in the know for our great events like Puzzle Jam Global and our in-person event, Puzzle Jam South. And I know that you appreciated this event because you watched the video. So if you would like to support us by becoming a member, sign up on the newsletter to know when the membership opens. Because we couldn't do this without you, our puzzle community. Now take a couple of minutes to go sign up on our newsletter and then go watch another session of Puzzle Jam Global. Bye!